This is one of the thrills of the jobs, people, not just because we're in London on a brilliantly bright blue sky, crisp, cold winter's day, in the street where I used to work for so many years, but across from me has got somebody who I used to love watching play football, and somebody who I then followed leading my team, Aberdeen, into misery as manager of Celtic, because we have Martin O'Neill with us this morning. Buenos dias, Martin. Good morning to you. Thanks for coming out.
Oh, it's a pleasure, thank you.
I'm going to start by saying we are here principally because you fascinate us, but more pertinently because On Days Like These has just been published, and although there may be royalties to pay for this, On Days Like These is actually your autobiography. It's fabulously written. You didn't need a ghost.
No, thank you.
And before we get into what's in the book, why is it titled On Days Like These?
Well, you're playing it, absolutely playing it. That is exactly it. I was searching around for a title for the book, and I thought, well, it contains some highs, naturally, quite a number of lows, and I was listening, strangely enough, or my wife actually, I'll give her the credit for it, heard this song by Matt Monro, On Days Like These, which is the opening to the film The Italian Job, and it's just absolutely brilliant. First of all, Matt Monro, terrific crooner. I remember Matt Monro, you might not.
The man with the golden voice.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, and and the song is just fantastic. It's I think it's kind of relevant as well too, because on days like these are exactly that. You don't know whether they're good days or bad days.
Was there any gold bullion in your career with a bus tipping over the back of an Italian mountainside, or did it just seem a little bit like that?
It just seemed a bit like that. No, I absolutely not. No, I was born into a Catholic Irish nationalist family, middle one in the family, four brothers, 4 sisters, and so grew up in a little village in Kilrea in County Derry. You would think at that time this is early 50s to the late 50s, and people ask was there much trouble at the time, because obviously Northern Ireland was what shall I say, for 30 years it was just besieged with trouble, but in the 50s there were I would say skirmishes around the border towns at the time, but never seemed to affect me. And in actual fact, I had as many Protestant friends growing up as I did have Catholics.
In the way you tell it in the book, life seems, if idyllic's too strong a word, I know you'll contradict me, but there was time for GAA, there was time for football, there was time for cricket. You said that you lived in an estate where it was predominantly Protestant and only 4 Catholic families, but it was the typical thing that I think used to breed great men and women in sport, out, constantly playing. Sport gives you society, sport gives you challenges, and when you do a range of, because there is an interest in cricket, I think, stemming from back then.
Very much so, really. By the time that we got our television, about 1960, I think it was. In fact, Blackburn Rovers and Wolves was the first FA Cup final I saw on our own television. And so remember Black and White, Fred Truman, the Ashes series. You think them coming in, Fred Truman. I remember getting that record of 300 wickets or something like this here. And of course there was an Australian player called O'Neill as well too, believe it or not. And I used to ask my mother, are we related to this? Are we related? She hadn't a clue. But no, so he's down in Australia. Obviously, I assume he must have been Irish immigrant at some stage or another. But even so, Bill Lawry,
yes.
Redpath, and all of those players.
Was this in the time of Laker and Titmus?
That would have been Titmus, yes. Laker, I think, was just before that. Yeah. So naturally, great interest in that. But here was the point. So we used to take this. My 2 brothers. We played in the backyard. We put up the couple of sticks for the wickets and things like this here. And great.
What about the rest of the equipment? I'm genuinely interested. Could you afford a bat? Was it a real cricket bat? What did you use as a ball?
No. The ball was a tennis ball. Yeah,
Yeah.
we used to always have a tennis ball, and that was great. And I remember thinking the very first time I ever saw a real cricket ball, and it was so hard, and it was red, and it was shiny, and it was all these things, and I thought, oh, is that what they use?
They've got it wrong.
They've got it wrong.
It should go 300 metres when you hit it.
Exactly. But so what was interesting was that it was all right us playing amongst each other, but we needed to be a team, and therefore we played against this family called McAllister's. Now I was about 9 or 10 years old. My younger brother would have been a couple of years younger than that, but we were playing. John McAllister was, this was a family a couple of doors up, and John was a wee bit older than us, but to compensate for that age difference of where he would be strong and be able to bowl faster than any of us, he had a couple of sisters that played as well in the game, and he had them out fielding, and if we could hit a certain ball over the little, what would have been a little curve, that would be 6. But you could be caught. You could actually be caught out there as well too. So the number of times that his sisters dropped the catches and gave us 6 runs, and the number of times he sent them home, he sent them back up to the house again. So we essentially just played John on his own most of the time. So and every single ball that got anywhere near our legs, he just shouted LBW, LBW, which is crazy.
Cricket's played a big part in this series because our very first interview 7-8 years ago was Gary Neville, and Richie Beno had just died. And we were asking Gary, it surprised him to start talking about Richie Beno, but instantly he remembered Richie's phrasing and his rules for what you do and don't say, and that drew us into Gary and self-analysing about what adjectives he did or didn't use in commentary. Then about a year later we spoke to Phil, who'd been good enough to have come through with Michael Vaughan and Collingwood, and at the fork of the road, sliding doors you call it in days like this. Sliding doors, he could have been an England Test. He was youth captain for England, Phil was, and put in by, the Lancashire Leagues are unbelievable, and his dad put him in at 11 to face a West Indian opening bowler in a competitive match, aged 11 with a helmet. And the weirdest one in cricket is Jockey Bjorklund, if you remember Jockey, who played for Rangers, who's a Swede.
Yes.
Lives in Valencia. Obsessed by cricket. Obsessed. Could name you a West Indian all-time 11, a world all-time 11 from all the eras.
Is that right?
And I like when sports like that come up and feature, because the wider your palette about what you've learned, who you've watched, what the sport tells you, because each sport tells you slightly varied things, I think it changes our mentality.
Well, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things about that. Number one, West Indies, who had the great side, Wes Hall, Charlie Griffiths, all those players, they were all playing against England, and somehow or another they had a day off to play Ireland in a one-day game, and Ireland beat them.
Wow.
Ireland beat them, and Cyan Mills, way back in the 60s, beat them in a game. But they say now that Wes Hall, all the players, the West Indian players, the day off, they didn't treat Ireland too seriously. They'll beat them in any given time, and they were bowled out, I think, for about 36. But apparently they had been on the lash the night before, so I don't think they couldn't have seen a football, never mind a cricket ball at that time. So they got 36, and I think Ireland lost about 8 wickets to try and get there, to get the number, I think they might have lost 6 or something.
Well, they did.
But Ireland beat them in this little game, and it became...
That should be as famous as Munster beating the Blacks,
well,
for example.
It's really, really famous, I must admit, and it's certainly famous in Cyan Mills. But here was the point. Second point about this year, Richie Beno. And Richie Beno was... in those days, Richie Beno was playing for Australia at that stage. That's fine.
Yep.
But then he became this fantastic commentator, and he had a really great manner with him. He didn't slag people to the high heaven, but you felt as if he could deal with these situations, and yet he could easily go in to the dressing room of either the two teams, either the team that were the victors, the vanquished. He could have gone in there, and they would have welcomed him in, even though he might have been a bit critical about a performance. But I remember this one, never forget, a lad, Australian player called Rick McCosker. Rick McCosker was playing, I know that, and Rick McCosker was having a terrible time. I think it must have been the Ashes series, and Richie Beno's commentating. and he's getting ducks and he's getting ones and twos and stuff like this, but they continue to play him. And anyway, it got to a stage. He's let's say it was the third test or maybe and McCosker's average is about 1.5 or something. And so anyway, he comes into bat again, and he's bowled immediately. And Richie Penn, I'll never forget. We never forget this comment. He said, "That's rock bottom for Rick McCosker." It's just brilliant, absolutely rock bottom for Rick McCosker.
It's alliterative, it's poetic,
absolutely,
but also tight.
Brilliant, yeah, honestly. So my brothers, if I phone any of my two brothers now, with that age, and I turn around and said, "Rock bottom for Rick McCosker," they'd remember what it was. Yeah.
What is it about Barber's sons and sporting greatness? You and Vince Lombardi.
Oh God! There's where the comparison ends.
No, I don't think so.
Lombardi, yeah.
Super Bowl 1 and Super Bowl 2.
Absolutely. Have you been keeping an eye on the Super Bowl at the minute?
I love my NFL. This season I haven't been able to watch as much as I would like to.
Absolutely.
No, I love my NFL. Yeah. I've been to one Super Bowl, which I really don't know how I managed to wangle it, but I did.
Can you remember?
Correspond with your time at Leicester. It was in Miami, and it was the 49ers against the Chargers. It was an absolute thrashing. Steve Young was the quarterback, man of the match. He and Jerry Rice ran the whole thing. San Diego Chargers.
Am I right to eat this?
Please, no, work away. I will join you. Yeah. Would have been 95 Super Bowl, I think. And it wasn't a competition, but it was, one of the things was, for me, I hate to be parochial, seeing as we're talking about your life, your book, but in, the Super Bowl at that stage, if it wasn't, and it wasn't bigger than, say, a World Cup final or the Champions League final now, it's still gigantic. It would rank up there in the top 4 or 5 events. And after the game finished, because of the belligerence and the way that the Sports Union of Journalists negotiated, particularly sponsors and franchises over there, we were in the dressing room, the media. We were in the dressing room 30 minutes after the final. Not in a mix zone, not in a press conference, in the locker room, interviewing them. Now, because I'm honest and responsible, I like that. But I think about it, and I am quite slack-jawed in amazement because the room for absolute disaster where that introduced, let's stick with football, soccer, because there are a lot of other sports where the communication, the trust that I know you have with certain people, and for example, Pat Murphy, for example, whoever it might be you would choose, that can exist in the modern era. But mostly, I think our profession is not any longer sufficiently responsible to handle that privilege. Yet, with that privilege of being in there and talking to coaches and players and getting to know them, the chances of a better relationship and better reporting do augment. But that was my experience of the Super Bowl. Crazy.
Well, funnily enough, you can look at it from either side, really. You can look at it from a journalistic viewpoint. This is great. To be able to be in a dressing room 13 minutes after the game is over. It's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. It's what you would live for. It's terrific. I'm going to be speaking to one or two. Was it the victors or was it the team that we could beat?
I went in the 49ers.
All right. Okay. Fine. All right. Okay. So it's great and it's fantastic. But you might have been allowed into the dressing room. Let's say Alex Ferguson just lost an FA Cup final. Well, number one, you wouldn't be in that dressing room anyway for a start. But secondly, to allow someone in 13 minutes after it would be kind of crazy. I never did it myself. I didn't, and yet the hole in the wall documentaries are the things that you love. Absolutely, you like to have it.
I really like. You've always been able to see. However you decide to act, you've always been able to see both sides, and you're right.
Absolutely.
Inside views, when well done, are addictive.
Of course, they're great. Remember Peter Reid one when Peter Reid did it. Peter's language is incredible. Great, good old player.
Let's not say he's the only one in football who uses that language.
We're all.
I think I'm up there with them.
We're essentially all the same. No, but I'm
the only man who can outswear me is Ozzy Ardiles.
Yes,
but he can.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, but no, I'm entirely in agreement with it. From a journalist's viewpoint, I'd love to be in there.
But under no circumstances would you have, or will you in the future allow it?
No, that's right. You know.
Look, why did you smile and raise your eyebrows when I said Lombardi?
Oh yeah, well listen, Lombardi is, he's just obviously a legendary figure, and you know, you use that legendary word advisedly, because anybody who wins 2 games nowadays are called a legend. But no, absolutely.
Did he have ideas that you know, about the primacy of victory above everything else?
Absolutely. This is it. It's what it's about. You have to win. You genuinely have to win. This idea that, you know, that let me put it this way. We start off then. I go and get a job, and the owner. Let's say I'm managing good Aston Villa, and Mr. Lerner is coming up and speaking to me. He wants to do a lot of things with the football club. He sees comparisons with Cleveland, you know,
The Browns.
Absolutely, he sees the comparisons. Not just the 2 football clubs as such, but also the cities themselves.
Yes, the region, the culture, the history.
Absolutely right, and it was great. And he also wanted to do make the training ground better, which he did. He just wanted a better spectacle around Villa Park, and it was all really, really terrific. But he didn't, and those things were all in the background. But to do that, the one thing that American owners despise most of all is relegation. You can't build a model, you can't build a business if you think that you might be relegated. So, and I have to get that notion out of your head. Relegation does exist. So on the one hand, what I'm saying to you is you have this long-term plan. You want to do all these things, and it's so good to hear. But in the meantime, you have to win football matches. Not only one to stay in the Premier League, but also then Aston Villa the expectations would be higher. You know, all those type of things.
It's a virtuous circle.
So getting back to the point, you've got to win. You've got to win the football games. And here's the point. And I don't know whether I mentioned this in the book or not, but my 2 daughters never really saw me play. You know, and so their view of me is as a football manager as much as anything else. And when I was at Wycombe Wanderers, I felt I have to win. I have to win here because we're the chances of me getting a job, let's say higher up, although that wasn't something that was in the forefront of my mind all the time. I loved Wycombe, but I had to win because, just let's say I didn't win there. This idea that you make all your mistakes in lower leagues and you'll be all right, it's balderdash, absolute balderdash. You lose matches at Wycombe. Do you think that the owner of Sheffield United is going to come up and say, "Oh yeah, we'll take a chance with him"? And the CEO says, "Well, by the way, he hasn't won a game at Wycombe." So you have to win. So here was the point. My daughters quickly realised, certainly my older daughter, would be 11 at the time, realised for the first time that Saturday evening is much better at home if her father has won the game, right? Because then that means that if we've won, I'm in a really good mood, and we can have some lousy Chinese in the corner of High Wycombe or something that gets here, but that'll be our our Saturday night. And so we won't be doom and gloom if we win the game. And every single time I left for match day games, and she would come out to the car, leave at the last minute, and I have to wind down the window, and she'd say, "Dad, don't forget, just win." And that's right, absolutely, that's right. So one stage or another, and you have to win. You have to win, and because it gives you respite for a start. And then if you go and win a trophy, as Sir Alex Ferguson says, it gives you a bit of power. And that's the point. It gives you power as well too. So all of the, suddenly you've won, and you've proved something, at least in the dressing room, and players will start to follow. When you're winning, players will follow, and those dissenters in the dressing room will have a lesser voice.
As well as a profession and as well as a testimony to a man or a woman's skills in that situation you described, and as well as being good for family life on a Saturday night, that process you described is terribly addictive.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. You have to, yeah, and you're it's all consuming as well. Too. Listen, there are managers, thankfully, I think, and I'm kind of envious of them, who can actually, still be really feel terrible about losing a football game on a Saturday, but by maybe about 7:30 or 8 o'clock or something, can leave it to the side and think about it. I'll think about it again. I've never been able to do that, I must admit. I think much to my regret, really. But it's really is all consuming for me.
I want to interpose. We've got people who we call socios, which are like season ticket holders, members who've been with us for all our nearly 8 years now, and they send in questions. Mm-hmm. So we have several. Robert Ryan is one. He's a die-hard Blue Nose Rangers fan and speaks extremely well of what he learned from watching you. Mm-hmm. Chris Brooks is another. Hello, Graham. There's a well-known quote from Brian Clough on dealing with a player who disagrees with him. We talk about it for 20 minutes and we decide I was right. I'd like to know if Martin were ever challenged by one of his players on anything where he actually sat down, thought about it, and realised that maybe the player was right after all. Did anyone in that situation change Martin's thinking on anything?
It's a really good point. And when you're in the dressing room and some player confronts you in the dressing room about a point, particularly if you've been adamant in the last 30 seconds or the last minute beforehand that you think that you're right, I used to find that really difficult to climb down from that. Really difficult. However, there are other times in the sanctuary of my room, if a player came in and said, "Listen, I think that we could maybe look at this," I might not necessarily agree with him then, but I could think about it. And if I did think that he was right, you know what I sometimes did? I sometimes then went into a dressing room and told the players in the dressing room when he was there to say, Tom was in my room there, made this point, actually, I think we're going to go with it. So suddenly now he gets a lot of kudos for being able to change the manager's mind. I don't know, I didn't want it to be happening too often, otherwise might as well hand the keys to the players. But overall, I have done once or twice,
It's a good answer to Chris's good question. Martin, here's the point temporarily where I'm not going to say I'm being tentative, but I'm being careful.
Okay.
Because it's a serious subject, but I'm curious and I want to know if you're willing. On days like these, you speak about living in Derry, and the family moving to Belfast. You get signed by Nottingham Forest. Bloody Sunday happens back in Derry. Mm-hmm. You're in England. The family, for various reasons, which include your mum and dad and some siblings, the ones that aren't older and have gone on to their own lives, phone you to say, we in the book you say we have to get out of Belfast. I think it's for a combine of reasons, and they move to Nottingham. But it means that for a large part of your life, particularly your footballing life, you're in the Midlands at a time when there are the Birmingham bombings, for example. Now, I'm not that much younger than you, but I grew up with what I can only admit was not a fear of the Troubles, but a degree of horrified fascination where the brutality of it and the way in which it ran, to my mind, out of control. And we look around today in society and we comment on this dreadful happening and this dreadful happening, and I think, although I didn't grow up in Northern Ireland, what went on there dwarfs by 1,000 times what's going on now. And I still find it heartbreaking and horrifying to think about, as I did when Brexit was being negotiated and people were utterly irrespectful of the gains that had been made. But to live in the Midlands in the 70s, did it bring tests of people's attitudes and behaviour. I think it must have done. And what was that experience like? How did you handle it? How has it changed you?
The Birmingham pub bomb, you won't believe this, I was in that pub 2 nights before.
One of the two that was bombed?
Yeah, in the tavern in the town.
Lord.
Unbelievable. So what was happened is that, I'll
Lord.
tell this story, that Jethro Tull were playing
There's
in
a
the
change
Birmingham.
of tack.
Yeah, Jethro Tull were playing in the Birmingham Odeon on the Tuesday night, and I have to say that from Nottingham to Birmingham in those days, in the 70s, you had to come through Tamworth and Lichfield and all these particular places. No sat nav in your car. I've just had the car for the first time. So I'm going with my brother and a Scottish lad with me, Jim McCann, who's professional at Forest as well too. So we're going to watch Jethro Tull play. And so I got lost along the way, and thinking we're not going to make this at all. So there must have been, I think it was at either Lichfield, I think it was. Remember, the motorways didn't exist, or the ones that linked Nottingham and Birmingham.
It's dark, as you say, no GPS. When you're lost, you're kind of properly lost.
Absolutely. So there was a girl waiting for a bus and we asked what was the best way to go into Birmingham. She said, well, actually, I'm going in there at this minute. So she came with us, and she was meeting her friends in the tavern in the town, which is about 200 yards from where
the
gig is. And so we have, and now suddenly, because she's in the car with and taking us there, we're going to be on time. And not only that, we said, well, listen, thank you very much for that there. She's now early for her appointment with her friends coming in. We go in for a drink, and you go in and you go downstairs into the area. So in other words, just let's say that almost to the minute, 48 hours later, the bomb's taking place. If Jethro Tull had been on a Thursday, we wouldn't be here.
How do you cope with that in a spiritual sense? Did you talk to, say, Geraldine about it then?
No, you know what? It was such what shall I say? I'm losing words here in this minute because it's hard to. Right, okay, you'll be able to edit all this in. No, I just felt I felt that. What shall I say? It was an awful event, obviously. The chances of me being in that pub at any given time were like millions to one,
mm-hmm.
and then suddenly you could easily have been in it. This is like 48 hours almost to the second for beforehand. So and of course, if the blast is going to take place, you're going down into a sort of a cavern area as well too. So it was
good night Vienna, as my dad used to say.
Yeah. So it was obviously it was a dreadful event. Of course, it was a dreadful event with its and all the people, all the families who suffered from that there. So it did take its toll.
And Andy Cochran writes in to say to us, for Martin, what was the overwhelming feeling and experience of being part of a Northern Ireland team that beat Spain in 1982 and went through to effectively the quarterfinals? Andy says, I was watching it as a 12-year-old at the time, and I imagine that being involved must have been amazing.
Well, he's absolutely right. I think that I suppose if you're asking Messi or asking Ronaldo, the pinnacle of their careers is to win the World Cup. If you are less talented and playing for a small nation, then it's certainly one of the big highs would be qualifying for the competition. So Northern Ireland, we had qualified in 1958 with the great players that they had, like Danny Blanchard, Bertie Peacock, Harry Gregg, people like that. And here we have this opportunity to try and qualify. We're in the same group. We're in the same qualifying group as Scotland. We're in alongside Portugal and Sweden, and we have some highs and some lows during the course of that there. Finally beating Israel at Windsor Park to qualify for the competition, just fantastic. So off we set. We're put in the same group as the host nation, Spain, one of the favourites, in with Honduras that we wouldn't really know a great deal about, but Central American side, and Yugoslavia, and they were called Yugoslavia at that time, who I think certainly in the mid 70s were probably the most talented bunch of players in European football. So and here we are. So we're stationed in Valencia, and yet 2 of the games are going to be in Zaragoza. So we'll fly each morning to these games and then fly back again. But we've drawn against Yugoslavia, drawn against Honduras, which leaves us, we have to essentially win the game against Spain. And I think, I honestly think, obviously, Spain having won the World Cup again, and what was it, 2010?
Yeah.
2010, you'd have to say, maybe this wasn't the most talented Spanish side of all time, but it was still for us, that was going to be a tough ask. And so for me to be the captain of the team that wins this game and takes us into the quarter-final was just fantastic. I mean, you mentioned some great moments in your career, and I had, holding the European trophy aloft, which belongs to the likes of Puskas, Di Stefano, and George Best, and the Celtic lads, and that was fantastic. And then this moment here beating Spain to be in to take us into the quarterfinals of the World Cup, it's just amazing.
Are there glimpses of, you write about the whole experience in the qualifying campaign really well on days like this, your autobiography, but are there glimpses of what the living in the World Cup, living in Valencia was like? Because the heat must have been incredible. You travelled that stage, I know. No. You're living there in high summer for a long time. Yeah. Probably you've no notice of this, but 6 months before Spain has had a coup, the armed forces have tried to storm, and it's Valencia that the tanks surround.
Yes.
It's really only 6 months before.
Yeah.
Could any of you speak Spanish? What were the locals like? What was Billy Bingham like as a guy interacting with Spaniards?
Well, some really good moments, I must admit, because first of all, the experience is just fantastic. We trained. We did not. My good friend John Robertson, playing for Scotland at the time. Scotland were doing their pre World Cup in Portugal, and we are doing it down at Sussex University.
Practically Spain.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying in Brighton at the time. So the interesting thing about it, Sussex University was actually the weather was so brilliant that we could have easily have been out in Portugal, but that was more luck than judgment. And we had Jerry Armstrong. Jerry was incredibly fit at the time. Bingham had us doing an awful lot of pre-season work or pre-World Cup work,
which means
like a pre-season
running.
We did a lot of running.
Jerry liked his running.
Jerry could run. He could run forever.
Can I tell you, Jerry's told me many times he never had a bad game in his life. Just so that we're clear about that.
Well, it's interesting you should say. Well, I might as well go straight to that story because we were staying in the hotel in Valencia. The phones to the room and trying to phone home, very, very expensive at the time, very expensive. And Jerry, and we obviously want to hear, we're cocooned in Valencia, but things are going well for us, so we really want to hear what people are saying back home. And one of the things that we did get was that just before the competition had started, Jimmy Greaves was asked how Northern Ireland might do, and Jimmy Greaves was very, very funny. He said, I think the Northern Ireland players should pack a toothbrush and an overnight bag because they'll be coming home soon. And it was great, kind of funny. But so as the competition is going on, Jerry's doing brilliantly in the competition, and Jerry has befriended a cafe owner about 300 or 400 yards down from the hotel. And of course then Jerry is now the messenger. We're sending him out to find out what's happening, what are they saying about us, Jerry? The news must be really great. And so after we'd beaten Spain, Jerry's sent out again, though it didn't take much for Jerry to go down there. He would have volunteered anyway. And so he's back. He's coming up the road. We're waiting in anticipation. Jerry, what are they saying about us? Saying about you? He said, there's only 3 players in this World Cup: Socrates, Falcao, and myself. He said, which is brilliant.
24 carat Jerry.
Absolutely. Socrates, Falcao, and myself. That's Jerry. But he was having the tournament of a lifetime. He was playing great. And of course we had Norman Whiteside as a young kid coming through, the youngest player since Pelé to play in the World Cup. He was essentially a strong boy, really, really strong, good player. And we needed him in the side as well too. He could look after himself, Graham. He was really, Norman's very strong for a 17-year-old, really, really brilliant. And but what we had about the team, we had a good, naturally good spirit, Catholics and Protestants joining in together, and really good spirit, good camaraderie, obviously. And the great thing about us is that we could defend strongly. If we had something to hold on to, we could defend it. For instance, when we scored early on in the second half against Spain, it's a long 45 minutes. But the one thing you felt is that, they might get a goal, but they'll not overwhelm us, and then when Maldini gets sent off with 20 minutes to go.
Spain had a quite helpful referee on the night, if I remember
Incredible,
correctly.
yeah. He was South American fellow. Yeah, was it from Colombia? Was it? Yeah. So, and he sent Maldini off without even seeing the incident. Didn't even see it. Anyway, but for us to win the game against them was just really absolutely extraordinary. So
there, Andy, are some of Martin's memories of Spain in 1982. You go through and you do well, and there's a second group stage then.
Second quarter-final, yeah.
France,
Austria and France. We drew with Austria.
That's France side.
French side were exceptional. The best team in the World Cup were
The
Brazil.
midfield is Tigana,
Fernandez and
Gires,
Uh-huh.
Trésor at the back, Platini up front, Diaz.
Absolutely.
Whoa. And they get bullied out of the semi-final by Thug Schumacher.
In the game against France, I score a goal in the game, and it's absolutely roasting hot. We're playing in Atletico Stadium, the Celtic Calderon.
Yeah.
And I think 1982 was, even by Spanish standards, a really, really hot summer. I think it had been the hottest one they'd had for about 30 years. Really. And so we're playing, about 3 o'clock in the daytime or something. It's 3 or 4 o'clock in the day. And 25 minutes gone in the game, I play a 1-2 with Jerry Armstrong, and Jerry incredibly gives it back. Normally speaking, he would turn and go in another direction, plays it back.
Looking for Socrates or...
I hit this left foot into the net, so I'm halfway around Madrid celebrating before the Sammy McIlroy shouts to me and says, it's offside. I'm a yard onside, as the TV cameras would prove. Anyway, so had we taken the lead, Graham, I listen, we're well beaten in the match because we started to chase it. Let me tell you, a minute later, after Gires scores, so they're leading 1-0 at half time. Had we have been the other way around, it might have been a long time for France. They were magnificent side. Most likely they would have caught us, but you never know.
You've allowed me to dream that it's a semi-final, Northern Ireland against Germany, and West Germany, whatever happens, but Jerry clattering Schumacher rather than Schumacher clattering Patty
That
Stone.
could easily have happened.
Lord, why?
Yeah, could easily have happened.
I've hated Schumacher all my life for that. Look, Martin, there's one key question here sitting by Andrew Anderson. I don't know what you make of it. Martin saw Scottish football up close during his glorious years with Celtic and encountered our national team, both playing for Northern Ireland and managing Ireland. Can you ask Martin why our national team, Scotland, has been much less successful than Ireland in the last 20 years or so? And what would he recommend, principally, we do to change that?
Well, it is a surprise to me. I think that, let me start. When I was a player in the 70s with Nottingham Forest, there wouldn't have been a top team, and I'm talking about your Liverpools, I'm talking about your Arsenal, you're talking about, that didn't contain top quality Scots players playing in the side, really top quality.
You had John.
Well, we had John
world
Robertson,
class.
we had
Kenny Burns,
absolutely, Archie Gemmell,
Archie was
absolutely,
magnificent. John McGovern from Bankery,
John McGovern,
just down the road from me.
John never actually, I don't ever think he played for Scotland, but
Martin, we're claiming him, okay?
Okay, oh, absolutely, absolutely.
No, I don't think he ever did. John O'Hare at some stage.
John O'Hare did play.
Yeah.
So, and then you look at the Liverpool side, Souness, Hansen, Dalglish, players like this here, great. So, and so you would have expected Scotland to have gone on to have done really well. If you can remember Ali MacLeod coming back and saying they'll be disappointed they don't get a medal in the competition.
I can remember.
Yeah.
They pinched him from my club. They pinched him from Aberdeen.
So I don't really know what was going on or why Scotland didn't go and progress. But I think that, and I'll proffer something here, I think that when I was managing Celtic, Celtic we had some Scottish players, but what was happening is that Rangers and ourselves, we're having foreign players coming into yours now, and I think that these things eventually must take its toll somewhere along the way. I think that if you are getting and if you are having some players that you feel as if that this young Scottish player is maybe not progressing to the extent that he should be. I just feel that some foreign imports were probably in taking their place. Blocking development. I think that might be a point. But I think Scotland are getting themselves together again. Unlucky against not to qualify, really. And I do genuinely think that they have the talent. The talent looks as if it's coming back again.
More and more of them are playing in England. More and more of them are moving abroad, where they will learn different skills, different maturity. We can keep our fingers crossed, Andrew. Social Pete Jensen, on the theme of crime, criminology, do you have a favourite TV barrister or detective?
I'm not particularly. No.
Rumpole the Bailey, I think Pete wanted you to say.
Probably, yeah.
The England job, Martin. When they interviewed you, you said at the time, maybe first interviews now don't go down very well. Yeah. I'd have loved to have seen that generation of players that was moving on from Sven-Göran Eriksson being coached by you. Do you look back and think, well, I could have done better than maybe was done? And what do you think the blockage was? It about you taking your staff?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to it. I think that it was one where I'd been out of the game for about a year. I left Celtic obviously with wife having illnesses she had to overcome, and so by 2006 the England job was becoming available. I remember, and but I think there was a couple of things too. I think the England job is obviously a very, very special job. There's no question about it. It's up there alongside managing the likes of Brazil and Argentina, believe it or not, I think. And it is. I think there was a strong part of me probably thought that I wanted to go back into club management again. And while there might not have been anything in that particular day in the offing, I think that's probably, having had my time at Celtic. Now there's a chance here. Things were on the mend at home in terms of illness getting better, and so I think I probably had that at the back of my mind when England came calling. Also, probably thought that it sounds crazy. I probably thought that I have to do more. More to be the England manager at the time. I think that, and I think those things were in the back of my mind at the time. More in the sense that, perhaps maybe not, but I felt as if you have to maybe win a couple of championships in that there before you move on to do it.
You think the FA thought that?
No, that was kind of my thought at the time.
They should have given you the job, I think.
But essentially, I think that club management was still very appealing to me at this stage.
On that subject, James Cosgrove asks, I'd be interested to know how close Mark was to joining Leeds in 2001, 2002 when David O'Leary left. From what I remember, the local media reported as nearly a done deal before it collapsed, but I might be wrong. I don't think Leeds would have collapsed so badly had we managed to get Martin in at that point.
I mean, I must admit that I was, there were a number of offers at the time, Leeds United included at the stage, and but I must admit I was really loving it at Celtic, So that was. But the chance, if my contract was running down at Celtic, then the Leeds United job, which was a really, really big job, would have been something of serious interest.
Some quick fire ones before we talk about the future. I'd be fascinated to know, what's the best player signing you've ever made for your perspective, pound for pound, across your entire managerial career?
Well, it's a very good question. I've been asked that a number of times, Graham, and I'm genuinely not sure. Some, for instance, some players that have cost £6 million, which I think have been great. How do they, if you're talking about pound per pound, how do they compare to 50,000 Didier Agat, for instance? But all these players that, let me start at Celtic, for instance. If when Mark Viduka left to go, that left a big hole. He didn't want to come back. I never managed Mark. He was leaving in the summertime. He made it clear that he was leaving, and he was a brilliant footballer. And I would love if he had stayed at the football club, but he had made his mind up to go. So when he leaves and he goes to Leeds, we use the money and I take Chris Sutton. Chris Sutton comes out. Now, if Chris Sutton had, although he wanted to come at the time and it was great, and he was there for the opening game of the season because we played Dundee United at Tannadice, but if he had waited 6 or 7 weeks or something like this here, and by the time that we had played Rangers in I think it was in our 4th or 5th game, the time that we beat them 6-2, and Sutton had a big influence in the game. Therefore, Sutton, if he had not been there at this stage, Rangers could have overcome us, in the game, and all of this, all our first season's work, could have been undone in the first couple of weeks, So if we hadn't got Mark Viduka's replacement, it hadn't have been Chris Sutton, it hadn't been somebody else, let's say, it might not have happened. So Sutton always maintains that he was the major signing.
I've been party to your cat and dog act on stage, which is fantastically funny. Yeah. But when Chris talks privately, he said he was miserable, he was a flop, you rescued him. Yeah. Now I know you won't say to him on stage what you just said about him here, and he doesn't say about you, because it's a brilliant thing you've got going. But he knows that you lifted him out of the mire.
I did, but he was a big and there was a big player coming to us. It's really big player at that stage.
Across on days like these, there are so many trophies. There's so much winning. There's so much that Vince Lombardi would have approved of. But which medal, which trophy, which as a player or as a manager with Wickham or Celtic, Leicester's trophies, they haven't won that many in their history, and you're dominant in the number of trophies. Which trophy, which medal, player or manager, if you have to go right in here, the answer comes out naturally. Which one is it?
Well, as a player, the European Cup final, I didn't play in the first one in Munich, and I picked up an injury about 3 weeks beforehand, but whether I would have played or not, it's another point, because Trevor Francis, great player, was going to be eligible for the final. The rules were kind of strange in those days, that's the only game that he was eligible for. He scores a goal at the back post with John Robertson
crosses the right hand back post,
where I would have been.
Who might have been there?
Absolutely, I was there for most of the season, so why shouldn't it have been there again? So that would have been fantastic. But for me to miss it, which was a major disappointment, and then the following year, Nottingham Forest going again and winning it, just the final whistle. Against Hamburg when we won it in Madrid Stadium, which is fantastic. So, and that's what you set out. You saw one of my first games I ever saw on TV, and it wasn't even me, was the European Cup final. Frankfurt, absolutely.
At Hampden, being devastated by Real Madrid.
And so if you think, in a black and white TV where you see these white shirts, so angelic looking, and the players who were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So from that viewpoint,
it meant something above all the other things it meant to win at the Bernabeu.
I think so. I absolutely, yes. If you were choosing some place, it would be there at the new camp, So, but you would absolutely, yeah.
Didn't you score at Camp Nou?
Um,
Or was it home for Distillery?
I was at home for Distillery against the goalkeeper. I didn't realise until somebody told me a couple of years ago, was Pepe Reina's father.
Miguel Reina,
Yeah.
who played for Atletico in the final.
Mhm.
Atletico lost to Bayern Munich on a replay.
That's right.
Schwarzenbeck scores from a different postal code against him in the 91st minute. Bayern draw and then win the replay 3-0. And poor old Pepe Reina's dad, who was not a gigantic goalkeeper, got the blame for that one.
Yeah.
Legendary man, nice man too.
So that would be that, and then obviously with
manager,
at international level, I think that obviously the moment we beat Spain, which is great, and me being captain of the team. So those are big moments. As a manager, that would be, hard to imagine really. Hard to think because each one in its context is really important to me. For instance, getting Wycombe Wanderers into the Football League, really big moment. That's what I set out to do, and so that was great. Days at Leicester, where if you told me about 5:15 in the 30th of March in 1996 that I would actually win a competition with Leicester, win a couple of competitions, that you would have got long odds about it, because we'd just lost to Sheffield United and the crowd were not happy. We're not happy with their manager. Not happy at all. So Leicester days were great. Obviously, Celtic was just phenomenal. Hard to imagine one specific cup,
Then, before I talk about the future, I have to ask you about Popeye, because there are a lot of laughs on days like these. And you talked about the supporters. There's a lot of traction from large numbers of know-it-alls behind the dugout. Lewis is a substitute, and Whitlow is not good today.
Yeah.
But I cannot allow Lewis onto the pitch. His surrogate dad behind me will have won. And this is the man who's been bawling at you, get Lewis on, get Lewis on. So you say his surrogate dad behind me will have won, and I will have no option but to continue with him until the season ends, or my time as manager ends, which might be more close at hand. I cannot buy a win. Whitlow is injured for our next home game, and finally I start Lewis in the match. At least Popeye behind me will be satisfied. But with 15 minutes gone, Lewis slips, allowing the winger to cut inside and fire a left foot shot that whizzes inches past the post. What happens next is unbelievable. From just over my right shoulder, the same face that has for weeks been screaming for Lewis's appearance roars more loudly than ever. Get Lewis off.
Get him. It's it's incredible. It is. It's salutary lesson for me, because do not listen. You have to. I couldn't believe it. You thought, sometimes when you can't buy a win, and you're starting to think, well, I might have to please somebody by picking the team. I remember Jimmy Nicholl once saying when he was a manager, and they weren't getting a result. I think it might have been down at Millwall. He said, sometimes you actually pick a player because he's actually hanging around. He was joking, but I got the message. I know what he. And some of these boys behind, but one in particular was shouting, "Get Lewis on!" for game after game after game, and I thought, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And he was coming on for a couple of moments towards the end of matches. He had a lot of talent, the boy Lewis, a lot of talent. They just
it's not for old Lewis. I'm more interested in it's Popeye that I'm.
But it's Popeye afterwards, and then shouting, couldn't believe it, shouting, "Get Lewis off!"
Because the book's so good, I have to cheat with one last one that I didn't mention to you. Your initiation at Manchester City. I come from days, again, there's not that much of an age gap between us, and I think that when the game was more robust, I quite liked it. And I think often when arguments are temporarily sorted out by fisticuffs, you often get things clear, but of course it'd be the jail now, it'd be all over the papers. Yeah. But I'm thinking about Joe Corrigan's initiation ceremony at Manchester City. Yeah. Would you like to describe it?
Yeah,
Joe, for anyone who doesn't remember him, is a
Joe's a very big lad.
Fists like meat plates.
Absolutely, a very big lad. And we'd played It was a Saturday night game, and we're playing down somewhere in Somerset, I think it was. And the following Monday night, we're going up to Ibrox to play. So, but we will be travelling essentially overnight and heading. It's a long way, Somerset up to. And anyway, we played in the game. It's our first match, I think, of our pre-season, and then we're going to Ibrox for the Monday night. And so we get onto the bus, and Tommy Hutchinson, yeah, and, Tommy Hutchinson says, "Hey Joe, you haven't given Martin his initiation yet." And I thought, is he going to hand me a little medal or something? Have you got one of these? Is this peculiar? Just
welcome to the club.
Just welcome to the club, absolutely. And Joe said, "Oh no, that's right." And I mean, if you're expecting it, I think you can maybe take some sort of action in minute. And but Joe just leathered you straight in the chest at this point, and that must have gone over 3 seats, honestly, the back of the bus. So you can imagine what that was like. And then when Joe realised that was a very, very strong point, he's asking you, "All right?" Well, I couldn't even answer because I couldn't get a breath. And it's a long way. It's a long way up to Glasgow from Bideford, I think it was. Bideford in Somerset, is it? Wherever it is, but it's down there, maybe close to Devon. That's a long way on a bus there.
If you can't breathe.
Absolutely. So he busted me ribs in the end of it. And then I don't know why I didn't want to start the game against Rangers. And but John Bond, I didn't tell John Bond about this thing. Of course, he couldn't do. But I was Bond plays me in the game, and then wants to know why he takes me off at half time because I'm useless. Absolutely useless with it. I know. I don't want to be at Ibrox. I want to be in some hospital trying to get my ribs sorted out.
You're a sufficiently tolerant man to allow me to say with a certain drop of humour, better days, but not that particular day. But
no. Listen, they were funny.
Funny in retrospect.
Yeah, they were funny. And when Joe Corrigan can beat you in a long distance run on the way home. I had a bit of a calf problem, I must admit, but when Joe Corrigan beats you home, then I think you really have to think about things,
On days like these, is a very funny, but also very detailed, very interesting read. Well written, well done. Good career, good life. I've watched you on stage a few times recently. Vibrant. It could have been a dressing room. You're sharp, you're young, you're live. You've kept yourself in good shape. I presume that you have not finished. That in the right circumstances, this obsession, it is an addiction. We talked about the addiction of winning. I don't think that's left you fully, has it?
Yeah, I don't think you can pick and choose jobs, or perhaps maybe not in the manner that I might have been able to have done quite some years before. And life moves on. I think that there are a number of things to this. One, I agree with you. I do have the energy, determination, and enthusiasm, and I think all of those things I wouldn't. I don't think I would lose. But I do feel that there's well, let's use the word ageism, and I think it might play a part. Whereas the thoughts are that perhaps maybe with all the experience that I would have, that you would feel that people might be looking for that there. And yet I do think that the ageism does seem to play a part in people's thinking. I might be wrong. I hope I'm wrong if that's the case. But management or coaching has certainly changed over the years. The way that Alex Ferguson used to run the football club probably no longer exists now, where he ran the whole football club. And in actual fact, I felt as if I did that myself, both at the clubs I was at Celtic, where Dermot Desmond said, "I want you to take ownership of the football club," which was like manna from heaven to me. It was just exactly what I wanted. And in my early days at Aston Villa, the owner said the same thing as well too. And eventually I earned enough at Leicester to be able to run the football club as well too. I'm not saying at the beginning, but certainly promotion onwards. So from that viewpoint, but the changes I see taking place in the game are probably as much to do with people's perception as anything else. And the perception is that if you manage in a certain era, you're not able to manage now, nowadays, which is just nonsensical, really, because management is there's an element to management that I don't think will ever change, and it's called man management, and I think I have that. It was interesting to see it must only be less than a year ago when I saw Guardiola speaking, and he was talking about how does he do it, and he said essentially that he's dealing with top quality players, and essentially it's man management. It is that, and he's not going to teach De Bruyne how to trap the ball. He's not going to teach Haaland how to score a goal. He's not going to do any of those things. But he's got a collection of players, and he has to keep them. He's to keep them happy. He's to keep the players who are not in the team happy, and that's a skill in itself to try and keep players happy. So all of those things I think are in the game. I do believe that the younger player probably can't deal with the criticism as much as players. Let's say, and I'll just only go back maybe the last 10 or 15 years. I think that's definitely true. And listening to some of the managers, who are younger than me, who are mentioning these particular things, probably feel that, and it might be as money plays a part in that. There, young players getting an awful lot of money. Then with that there comes a sense of entitlement, and I think those things that you have to look at. It would be interesting to see how, let's say, how Sir Alex Ferguson would look at it nowadays. But he has seen the changes that have taken place. I was starting to see those changes, but I still essentially think that management is as much to do dealing with those players in that sort of capacity, praising them when they need to be praised, analysing the game, criticism for want of a better word when it's due, but by the same token making sure that the players actually, if they have received some sort of criticism, that's not going to weigh heavily on them for the rest of the week or something like this here, that you can come back and make them play. And eventually the management game is making players play for you.
The either sad or potentially good thing is that those players, unlike you and I, didn't grow up with two TV channels, playing cricket with a stick and a tennis ball, and getting punched in the chest by the goalkeeper as an initiation. And some of those, when things like that change, it might be for the good. Mm-hmm. When things like that change societally, people are softer and they are more entitled, and it takes longer for some sort of galvanising word or gesture or argument to filter in. Instead, it's like, I've been hard done by, and they're taught that quite often, and they arrive in cars rather than having to take 3 buses across town and get home and do their homework and get to bed. And so the things that you've got will never change. The ability to convince, the ability to lead, the ability to teach on the training pitch, an understanding of what a team and what a team spirit should be formed of. Those things don't go away. I'm really pleased that you're not finished. It needs somebody to come to you. It needs the right person to come to you and say, Martin, we want you. That's effectively what we're saying, isn't it?
I think that's probably right. Now, you also have to, things will not come to you as I mentioned earlier, and it is a case of putting yourself out there. I think as well too, that you feel as if you want to do it. And I think these are the points. It's exactly what my wife and my daughters were saying to me. Dad, if you want to do it, you will go and do it. It's really up to you if that's what you want to do.
Well, the football community often listens to this podcast. This has been the big interview with Martin and NEILL. Principally, it's been driven by On Days Like These, which is published now. It's Martin's life story, written by Martin, which is always the best way to do it if you possibly can. Congratulations on the book. As I said before, you have to say congratulations on a life well lived. And I'm pleased to see that there's a possibility, at least, that if the right club, the right owner, or right director of football comes to you, that we'll see more of you. I think football is richer for having you in it.
That's very kind of you.
I think that's the truth. And there are many avenues left, which will be acerbic, accurate content on television or radio or on stage. If not, but for the moment, I hope somebody listens to this and says, yeah, I'll have some more days like those with Martin O'Neill.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much, Graham.